Free agency in baseball, as well as many other professional sports leagues, is the open market where players get offered contracts from any team in the league. To keep things simple for this video, we're only going to touch on how free agency came to be and how service time plays into how much money a player can make. So no contract clauses, waivers, or international free agency in this video. Got it? Alright, let's go. My name is Bobby, and this is Baseball Explained. We'll begin by going over the roots of free agency. Back in 1879, the reserve clause was implemented by the National League. This clause stated that when a player's contract expired, their rights were retained by their current team. In other words, a player was under control of the same team for as long as they played, with the only ways out being a trade or a release. So what did this reserve clause do? It kept player salaries down and gave players very little leverage to bargain for higher salaries, creating an endless chain of one-year contracts. Now, if you recall 11th grade history, then you know about the Sherman Antitrust Act. It existed to prevent companies from colluding on prices and creating a non-competitive market. But according to a Supreme Court ruling in 1922, antitrust laws did not apply to baseball because the sport was seen as entertainment and not business. And it took over half a century for things to change. In 1969, Curt Flood was traded from the Cardinals to the Phillies, but Flood refused the trade. This happened because the Cardinals were not willing to meet Flood's contract demands, and he felt that he should be able to offer his services to any team. He challenged the reserve clause in court, but lost his case and effectively ended his career. But his efforts would pay off for future players, as the clause was challenged again in 1975. Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally were pitchers for the Dodgers and Expos respectively. After they played in the 1974 season, their contracts expired. Their teams automatically renewed their contracts due to the reserve clause, but the two players never signed that contract. So they played in 1975 under no contract and argued after the season they were free to sign with any team since their contracts did not explicitly state that they would be renewed perpetually. And with the support of Marvin Miller, the executive director of the Players Association, they took their case to arbitrator Peter Zeitz, and they won, ushering in the era of free agency. MLB owners challenged this ruling, but lost, which resulted in an agreement with the players. Any player who had 6 years of Major League service time and was without a contract would become a free agent and eligible to sign with any team. So what's service time? Well, each day that a player spends on the 26-man roster or on the Major League injured list counts as 1 day of service. Heading into the 2020 season, the MLB regular season consists of 187 calendar days, and as long as a player reaches 172 days, it counts as a full year. Players who violate the league's policy on drugs or domestic violence do not accrue service time while serving their suspensions. And that's about it on service time, so let's see how this affects contracts. To make things simple, we're going to use a series of one-year contracts for Joe Random. Joe makes the opening day roster his rookie season, and his salary for his first 3 seasons will be at or near the league minimum, which currently sits at $563,500. Joe has no bargaining power at this point and is likely making less money than his performance would suggest. But after that 3rd year of MLB service, Joe is eligible for salary arbitration. He and his team will negotiate a salary for the upcoming season, and if they cannot agree by mid-January, they have a hearing in February. Both sides submit a salary figure, and an arbitrator selects the appropriate salary for the player. This process can happen again the next 2 years for Joe, but after he has 6 seasons of service, he is eligible for free agency. So to recap, less than 3 years of service is known as the pre-arbitration years, 3 to 6 years of service are arbitration eligible years, and 6+ years are free agent eligible years. Now, this was a very clean-cut example, and reality is not this straightforward. It's common to see players sign multi-year contracts once they're arbitration eligible, as teams want to keep their star players around long-term and know they have to pay them large salaries anyway. Players getting called up mid-season also makes this more complicated, which brings us to the Superto designation. The exact wording is that players who rank in the top 22% of service time among those with 2 to 3 years in the majors are eligible for salary arbitration. Now, that 22% part can sound confusing, but this typically boils down to players with at least 2 years and 130 days of service time getting extra year of arbitration. This exists so players who make their debut in late April or mid-May, like Nolan Arenado, can be compensated for playing close to 3 full seasons and not spend another year making near the league minimum. Last thing to mention for this video is non-tender free agents. All those players with less than 6 years of service could still become free agents if their team doesn't offer them a contract. The deadline to tender a contract to these players is typically in early December. Players with little service time are usually only non-tendered to clear a roster spot, and they may be re-signed on a minor league contract instead. Arbitration-eligible players who are approaching free agency are more likely to be non-tendered either due to injury history or the team feeling that their increased salary just isn't worth it. Non-tendered free agents are still subject to the same service time rules, so say Joe Random has 4 years of service time and is non-tendered, the next offseason he will not be eligible for free agency again unless he were to be non-tendered again. So bottom line, free agency can seem confusing at first, especially if you're new to following baseball. But as a rule of thumb, players with less than 6 years in the majors are not free agent eligible, and players with 6 years or more are free agent eligible. While there are exceptions to this, the big money making free agents everyone talks about will be those who have played more than 6 years. So I hope you found this helpful. Even if you're familiar with free agency, maybe you learned something new. Help me out by leaving a like, sharing the video, and clicking subscribe to help this channel continue to grow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.